It's sitting on top of a sleeping giant. Now, if you're sleeping next to an 800-pound gorilla, you monitor every burp, every snore of this gigantic gorilla, because when it...
The largest volcanic system in North America is heating up, and that's why people are saying Yellowstone Park just shut down. Well, they lied to us. For too long, we've been told the Yellowstone caldera is on the brink of experiencing a supervolcano eruption, but the scientists are here to lay these rumors to rest. Join us as we uncover the jaw-dropping truth behind the recent closure of Yellowstone Park. Brace yourself for a revelation that challenges what you thought you knew. We are exposing a story that's bound to leave you astonished. Yellowstone in all its glory. Yellowstone National Park is 3,272 square miles, making it greater than Rhode Island and Delaware combined. It's a beloved gem among U.S. national parks and showcases an abundance of nature's geological wonders. While most of the park lies in Wyoming, it also extends into Montana and Idaho. Yellowstone contains almost 10,000 hydrothermal features. Geysers, hot springs, mud pots, and fumaroles are the 4 types of thermal features. It's a true marvel. The wildlife here is equally impressive, boasting around 300 bird species and 16 fish types. More so, this park has the highest concentration of mammals, which is 67 species in the lower 48 states.
Billion years ago.
Or 640 million or 1,000?
1,000 years
Okay,
ago, I'm
okay.
sorry, you're right.
Because then we had some more time.
Yellowstone Lake, a stunning 132 square mile expanse, sits as the highest mountain lake in North America, drawing tourists for boating, fishing, and breathtaking views. And that's just one of the serene lakes and rivers in this magnificent park. For wilderness enthusiasts, there are over 100 miles of hiking trails, ranging from easy strolls like the 2.5-mile Natural Bridge Trail to more challenging ones like the 11-mile Sepulchre Mountain Trail. Plus, there are 15 miles of boardwalks offering diverse landscapes to explore. Camping enthusiasts will find over 300 designated backcountry campsites for overnight stays. Throughout the year, Yellowstone experiences a climate all its own. Warm, sunny days in summer give way to cool nights, while winter brings a chilly embrace, with temperatures often dropping below freezing. Old Faithful, one of its most famous geysers, has been faithfully erupting since 1870, though its intervals have become less predictable in recent years. Yellowstone is also famous for its bison herds, which have roamed the U.S. continuously since prehistoric times, occasionally causing bison jams on the roads. Not to mention, since opening up after the COVID-19 pandemic, the crowd flocking to Yellowstone National Park in the United States has peaked. The country's oldest national park will attract around 3.29 million visitors in 2022. Since 2008, the number of visitors has exponentially risen. But where do the famed Yellowstone volcanoes fit into this narrative, along with the geothermal wonders of this wonderful park?
1,000 times bigger than this. What type of damage are we talking about here?
We're talking about immediate damage out to 100.
And if a volcano is right beneath this marvel of nature, why was the park considered safe? Well, Yellowstone's history spans a remarkable 11,000 years, with the earliest traces of human activity found along the shores of Yellowstone Lake. Beneath the surface of this park lies one of the world's largest active volcanoes, turning Yellowstone into a supervolcanic system. However, its last major eruption took place a staggering 2.1 million years ago. To grasp the potential threat of an eruption, let's delve into the supervolcano system in more detail. The Yellowstone caldera. So, you may have heard of the term caldera, but might be wondering what it is. Well, a caldera is like a huge, round hole in the ground. This bowl-shaped depression forms after a volcanic eruption. Imagine it like a giant bowl-shaped dent. When a volcano erupts explosively, it shoots out a lot of lava from deep inside it. This makes the inside of the volcano kind of empty, like an empty bottle, but the surrounding area becomes heavy and is unable to sustain itself. So, because the inside is empty, the surrounding ground on top collapses. It ends up making a big crater. Now, the resultant crater is called a caldera. So, many moons ago, a volcano erupted and resulted in the Yellowstone caldera forming. This makes the Yellowstone caldera, also known as the Yellowstone supervolcano, a massive volcanic depression located in the western central portion of Yellowstone National Park in northwestern Wyoming, measuring approximately 50 kilometers by 70 kilometers. The Yellowstone caldera is the youngest of the park's 3 main calderas, dating back around 640,000 years. Now let's clarify something important. Yellowstone is not a classic cone-shaped volcano, like you might picture from movies or textbook illustrations. It doesn't have a single towering peak. Instead, it's characterized by the large caldera at its center. Volcanism history. How far back can we trace the origins of this behemoth sleeping giant? Extensive volcanic activity, ice, and broad mountain formation formed the region approximately 66 million years ago during the Cenozoic era. This included the development of the Absaroka Range, which runs along the north and east edges of the current park. A period of strong volcanism began 16.5 million years ago around the borders of present-day Nevada, Oregon, and Idaho, resulting in massive volcanic eruptions. A 500-mile track of more than 100 calderas was formed as the North American plate migrated southwest over a shallow body of magma. Following that, 3 more massive eruptions occurred in the Yellowstone area, 2 of which released more than 240 cubic miles of magma at a magnitude of 8, the highest ranking on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. The Huckleberry Ridge Tuff eruption happened around 2.1 million years ago, and the Mesa Falls eruption happened around 800,000 years ago. The Yellowstone caldera was formed 640,000 years ago as a result of the Lava Creek eruption. Massive amounts of heated volcanic rocks were ejected as a result of these eruptions. Hot ash, pumice, and other rock fragments collected and formed thick sheets of hard rock. Volcanic debris from these eruptions covered most of the continental United States, with some reaching as far south as Louisiana. Yellowstone's last volcanic activity occurred roughly 70,000 years ago, when rhyolitic lava flows erupted. The Pitchstone Plateau in southeastern Yellowstone National Park was produced as a result of massive flows. Fast forward to the present day, and we now have a park existing on top of a caldera. We all can see that the park's stunning landscapes, including its geysers like Old Faithful and hot springs like the Grand Prismatic Spring, are essentially surface expressions of the volcanic activity happening beneath. Imagine the magma chamber as a vast hidden cauldron of molten rock. Over time, pressure builds up, and occasionally it can find its way to the surface through geothermal features. This is what creates the geysers, hot springs, and fumaroles that make Yellowstone so unique. But before we jump into how imminent a volcanic eruption is, let's discuss these startling geothermal wonders of the park. Hydrothermal features. Let's take a closer look at the wonders that make Yellowstone National Park so renowned. The park is home to an exceptional collection of geothermal wonders, including hot springs, geysers, mud pots, fumaroles, and travertine terraces. These features offer a unique opportunity to witness Earth's geothermal activity up close. The most common hydrothermal features in Yellowstone are hot springs. Water from a hot spring seeps through the bedrock underneath Yellowstone and becomes superheated at depth, beginning as precipitation. An open plumbing system allows hot water to ascend unhindered to the surface. Convection currents circulate the water regularly, preventing it from becoming hot enough to cause an eruption. Crested pools' violent boiling waters can rupture at times, blasting water into the air like a geyser. However, it is considered that in the instance of the crested pool, no constrictions obstruct the flow of water to the surface. The large mouth of the spring and its 42-foot depth create a natural route for superheated water to circulate continually to the surface. Then, we have geysers, which are hot springs that erupt regularly. The eruptions are caused by superheated water beneath the ground, becoming stuck in channels leading to the surface. The warmest temperatures are at the bottom of these channels, but due to the weight of the water above, the deep water cannot evaporate. Instead, steam is propelled upwards in bubbles, collecting in the channel's narrow areas until they effectively get choked, causing the geyser to overflow since the contained bubbles lift the water above. This causes the pressure to drop until abruptly violent boiling occurs along much of the column's length, producing a massive amount of steam that drives the water out of the vent in a superheated mass. Although the mud pots are not as visually appealing as other hot springs and pools, these tumultuous pools of hot, muddy water and odd landscapes are another element that distinguishes Yellowstone National Park. And how can we forget fumaroles, which are the most active geothermal landforms in Yellowstone National Park? They also have a chemistry distinct from geysers and hot springs. Fumaroles and mud pots contain acid sulfate water and have a low pH. These fumaroles are made of meteoric water that has been infused with hot gases emitted by a magmatic source.
Know it. And again, we don't want to panic anybody. It could happen tomorrow, or it could happen 100,000 years from now. It's black.
Next, travertine terraces are a type of limestone made up of calcite and aragonite, both of which are calcium carbonate. Unlike limestones which form in the ocean from the shells of small plankton and other marine animals, travertine forms in high-temperature hot springs when hot water, at 163 degrees Fahrenheit, is ejected from the subsurface. The fall in pressure and temperature at the surface leads carbon dioxide dissolved in water to gas. It's comparable to opening a can of soda, which causes calcium carbonate to precipitate. And bubbling all these geothermal features to life is the magma underneath. Interestingly, magma could be as close as 3 to 8 miles beneath two resurrected domes within the Yellowstone caldera today, the Sour Creek Dome and the Mallard Lake Dome. Both domes can inflate and deflate as magma volume and hydrothermal fluids move between them. Due to net inflation, the caldera floor has tilted to the south over the last century, forcing trees on Yellowstone Lake's southern sides to stand in water and a sandy beach to form at the lake's northern end. So, are we at risk of seeing a supervolcanic eruption? A distant reality. It's highly unlikely for Yellowstone to experience a major eruption anytime soon. According to experts at the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, the most probable events would be things like steam explosions, moderate earthquakes, or even slow lava flows. These are far less devastating compared to the kind of eruptions that form calderas, where large amounts of lava gush out rapidly. Jacob Lowenstern, who heads the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, emphasized that while super eruptions are a natural part of Earth's history, there's no guarantee it will happen in Yellowstone. He noted that Yellowstone has already had a long history, and there's a possibility it may never experience another major eruption. The United States Geological Survey, or USGS, believes that Yellowstone has been behaving consistently for the past 140 years. They believe the odds are very high that Yellowstone will remain eruption-free for centuries to come. Not to mention, there's even a chance that the Yellowstone volcano might become dormant.
Coincided with this meteor that hit Mexico, and we think it was a double whammy that knocked out the ground.
The magma chamber below it is influenced by both the heat from below and the cooler surface temperatures. If the heat from beneath decreases significantly, the chamber could solidify into granite. But for a minute, let's suppose a massive eruption did occur. What sort of devastation would we witness? Doomsday scenario if the Yellowstone supervolcano were to erupt. Here's what would likely happen. Deep-seated heat from the Earth's core would start to liquefy the rock just beneath the surface, creating a mix of magma, rocks, gases, and more. Over thousands of years, this mixture would accumulate and rise, building up pressure and forming a dome-shaped ground with cracks along the edges. When the pressure finds an outlet through these cracks, it would lead to a powerful explosion, rapidly emptying the magma across the park. This eruption wouldn't just involve dangerous lava flows. It could result in an immediate loss of up to 90,000 lives and a spreading layer of molten ash up to 3 meters thick, reaching as far as 1,000 miles from the park. Rescue efforts would likely face significant challenges. Ash would block all ground entrances, and the dispersion of ash and gases into the atmosphere would hinder air travel, similar to what occurred during a smaller volcanic eruption in Iceland in 2010. Equally concerning is the potential for a nuclear winter that experts warn could cover the US and other parts of the world if Yellowstone were to erupt. Sulfuric gases released into the atmosphere would interact with the planet's water vapor. The resulting haze of gas wouldn't just reduce sunlight, it would also lower temperatures. This drop in temperature would have a severe impact on our food supply, devastating crops and disrupting the food chain by depriving those at the bottom of their sustenance. But it looks like Armageddon isn't coming upon us anytime soon. So, if we circle back to reality, where we're in no immediate danger, why is there strict monitoring of seismic activity in Yellowstone? Continuous monitoring. It's crucial to note that Yellowstone is constantly monitored by experts. They keep a close eye on any changes in geothermal activity, earthquake patterns, and other signs that might indicate increased volcanic activity. Recently, scientists have gathered fresh information, providing a clearer view of Yellowstone's underground workings. Right under the caldera, left over from the last eruption, lies the magma chamber. Stretching 465 miles into Montana, a solid rock plume feeds it with the potential to turn molten. It's under close watch. Magma, or molten rock, ascends through the plume into the chamber at a rate of 2 inches per year. There's no indication it'll halt, though it might come in bursts. Our visuals show both wider and narrower segments, like material flowing in a sewer line. This ever-active Yellowstone caldera is truly alive and breathing. Now and then, it stirs, and more data needs to be kept a close eye on. Recent research published in the Science Journal in 2022 revealed that one of the magma reservoirs beneath Yellowstone holds more magma than previously thought. However, even with this increased estimate, it still falls far below the necessary threshold for a massive eruption. Previously, scientists believed this reservoir was mostly solid, containing only 5 to 15% melted rock. They now suggest it's closer to 16 to 20%, indicating a slightly higher likelihood of an eruption. It's important to note that this doesn't mean more magma has been created. Researchers reevaluated existing seismic data to arrive at these findings. Yet, even with this adjustment, it's still well below the 35 to 50% threshold of liquid magma that scientists believe is needed to trigger a significant eruption. In the event of a caldera-forming eruption at Yellowstone, the United States Geological Survey predicts it could potentially impact global weather patterns.
You don't get much warning. What happens is the ground starts to rise, more and more earthquakes take place, more ash and volcanic gases start to be unleashed. That's about the only warning we get.
And have significant repercussions on human activities, particularly agricultural production, for a period of 10 to 20 years. For instance, the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1991 caused temporary alterations in global temperatures. However, specific predictions about the outcomes and duration of such a large-scale eruption remain beyond current scientific capabilities. The concern is, if the plume liquefies and accelerates, natural systems can throw surprises. There are many possibilities we may not be prepared for. Scientist Jake Lowenstern is searching for a connection between today's supervolcano.
It really is. I had a grizzly bear charge. I've got some good stories with grizzlies.
And its 3 past major eruptions, dating back millions of years. 2 massive eruptions at Yellowstone. So much material erupted that entire mountain ranges collapsed into the ground, essentially vanishing. While Yellowstone is geologically active, it's also relatively stable in terms of human timescales. There's no indication of an impending massive eruption, and scientists have sophisticated tools and monitoring systems in place to provide early warnings if conditions were to change significantly. So, why do we keep hearing about a potential eruption down the road? Frequent earthquakes. For that, we can blame earthquakes, but let's backtrack a bit. Take, for example, strong earthquakes, such as the M7.3 Hebgen Lake earthquake in 1959, which can occur in the region occasionally or twice every century. The Hebgen Lake incident resulted in a landslide that rushed across a campground, killing over a dozen people, as well as damming the Madison River, forming a new lake known as Earthquake Lake, which remains today. The event was generated by one of the several faults associated with the basin and range extensional province, which runs from eastern California to western Wyoming, and was unrelated to Yellowstone's magmatic system. Similar powerful earthquakes will occur in the future. Tracking seismicity and ground deformation in the region can assist geologists in better understanding which faults are most active, allowing them to make more accurate seismic hazard assessments. Now, the problem is that volcanoes don't operate on fixed timelines. They erupt when there's sufficient magma beneath the surface and the pressure for it to ascend. Currently, neither condition is met at Yellowstone. Volcanoes vary in their activity cycles, often driven by magma supply. While some have regular eruptions, like Kilauea in Hawaii, others, like Yellowstone, do not follow such predictable patterns. The notion of Yellowstone being overdue may stem from how earthquakes accumulate stress on faults, suggesting predictable intervals. However, this doesn't apply to volcanoes in the same way. Yellowstone's activity is closely monitored through various techniques, including seismicity, ground deformation, thermal feature temperatures, gas and water analysis, and river flow tracking. Indicators of an imminent major eruption would include a surge in earthquakes over a few weeks, substantial ground deformation, widespread geyser activity changes, and significant thermal gas emissions. The problem is that Yellowstone is known for its high seismic activity, with an annual average of 1,500 to 2,500 earthquakes. Most of these quakes are of such low magnitude that people can't feel them, but they are detected by sensitive seismological equipment. One of the most significant seismic events in the region was the Hebgen Lake earthquake in 1959, which measured 7.3 on the magnitude scale. Unfortunately, it resulted in the loss of 28 lives. This powerful quake triggered a major landslide in Madison Canyon and caused rockfalls in Yellowstone, leading to blocked roadways and extensive damage to structures in West Yellowstone. Since 1973, over 48,000 earthquakes have been recorded in the Yellowstone area. However, more than 99% of them registered at magnitude 2 or lower, meaning they were not perceptible to humans. There was one earthquake with a magnitude of 6.0 in 1975, 2 in the magnitude 5 range, 29 in the magnitude 4 range, and 379 in the magnitude 3 range. Earthquake swarms, where earthquakes cluster in both time and space, contribute to roughly half of Yellowstone's seismic activity. While most swarms are small, consisting of about 10 to 20 earthquakes, and lasting only a few days, others can involve thousands of earthquakes and persist for months. For example, in June 2023, the University of Utah seismograph stations reported 78 earthquakes in the Yellowstone National Park region. The largest of these was a minor 2.8 magnitude quake, located about 17 miles northeast of Moran, Wyoming, occurring on June 17th at 11:58 a.m. As of now, Yellowstone is stable, with no unusual seismic activity. But if a major eruption were to occur, it could have severe consequences, including ash fallout affecting a large region and impacting agriculture and watercourses. So if everything is relatively stable, why do we keep hearing about Yellowstone's unavoidable closure? The first closure first, we need to realize that the few times the park closed didn't happen because of a volcanic eruption. Let's go back to the past. The Yellowstone fires of 1988 marked the largest wildfire ever recorded in Yellowstone National Park's history. What initially began as numerous smaller fires rapidly spiraled out of control due to drought conditions and escalating winds. These fires merged into several massive flames, persisting for months. In a historic move, the entire park was shut down on September 8, 1988, barring emergency personnel, a first in its history. It wasn't until the arrival of cooler, damp weather in late autumn that the fires were finally extinguished. The devastating flames consumed a staggering 793,980 acres, or 36% of the park, at varying levels of intensity during the peak of the firefighting campaign. Over 9,000 firefighters were deployed, aided by numerous helicopters and aircraft conducting water and fire retardant drops. Given the extensive fires not only in Yellowstone, but also across the broader ecosystem and western U.S., the staffing levels of the National Park Service and other land management agencies fell short. This led to the deployment of more than 4,000 U.S. military personnel to bolster the wildfire suppression efforts. The total cost of the firefighting operation reached $120 million. Before the late 1960s, fires were generally viewed as harmful to parks and forests, with management policies centered on swiftly extinguishing fires. However, as the ecologically beneficial role of fire became better understood in the decades leading up to 1988, a shift occurred towards allowing natural fires to burn under controlled conditions. This proved highly effective in reducing the annual area lost to wildfires. In contrast, by 1988, Yellowstone was overdue for a substantial fire, and due to an unusually dry summer, numerous smaller, controlled fires were taking place. These fires burned in a patchy manner, jumping from one area to another and leaving some parts untouched. Certain regions experienced intense fires, consuming nearly everything in their path. Tens of millions of trees and countless plants perished in the blazes, resulting in a desolate, charred landscape. Soon after the fires subsided, plant and tree species swiftly rebounded, showcasing highly successful native regeneration. Media coverage, however, often sensationalized and misrepresented the situation, suggesting that the majority of the park was being decimated. Despite temporary declines in air quality during the fires, No lasting adverse health effects were documented in the ecosystem. Contrary to initial reports, the fires led to the loss of a few large mammals, although there was a subsequent decrease in the moose population. So, while Yellowstone's preservation has continued wholeheartedly, it wouldn't close down again for the next 34 years. The second closure back in 2022, Yellowstone National Park in the United States, went through an unusual closure. All 5 entrances were shut down due to record floods caused by heavy rain and glacier melt, wrecking roads, bridges, and nearby communities. The whole park, which covers parts of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, was off limits to visitors, even those with reservations for lodging and camping. The National Park Service, or NPS, worked hard to get visitors and staff out, especially in the hardest-hit northern area of the park. Park Superintendent Cam Scholey mentioned that the northern loop was likely to remain closed for quite some time.
2 summers was back in the deep backcountry, literally down.
Aerial footage released by the NPS showed large sections of the North Entrance Road, the route between Gardiner and park headquarters in Mammoth Hot Springs, Wyoming, being washed away by powerful floodwaters along the Gardner River. This cut off access to Gardner, a town with about 900 residents and home to many Yellowstone staff, right outside the North Entrance. Witnesses like Parker Manning, an Indiana resident, described seeing trees floating down the river and debris. He even spotted a lone kayaker navigating the intense floodwaters, which was pretty wild.
How bad the grizzly smelled that close.
Other roads suffered damage, either being washed out or getting covered in rocks and mud. Several bridges were affected. There were also reports of power outages in different parts of the 2.2 million acre park. Media coverage, however, often sensationalized and misrepresented the situation, suggesting that the majority of the park was being decimated, despite temporary declines in air quality during the fires. No lasting adverse health effects were documented in the ecosystem. Contrary to initial reports, the fires led to the loss of a few large mammals, although there was a subsequent decrease in the moose population. So, while Yellowstone's preservation has continued wholeheartedly, it wouldn't close down again for the next 34 years. The second closure back in 2022, Yellowstone National Park in the United States went through an unusual closure. All 5 entrances were shut down due to record floods caused by heavy rain and glacier.
Some peaks back in there was very familiar with.
Melt, wrecking roads, bridges, and nearby communities. The whole park, which covers parts of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, was off limits to visitors, even those with reservations for lodging and camping. The National Park Service, or NPS, worked hard to get visitors and staff out, especially in the hardest-hit northern area of the park. The park superintendent, Cam Scholey, mentioned that the northern loop was likely to remain closed for quite some time. Aerial footage released by the NPS showed large sections of the North Entrance Road, the route between Gardiner and park headquarters in Mammoth Hot Springs, Wyoming, being washed away by powerful floodwaters along the Gardner River. This cut off access to Gardner, a town with about 900 residents and home to many Yellowstone staff, right outside the North Entrance. Witnesses like Parker Manning, an Indiana resident, described seeing trees floating down the river and debris. He even spotted a lone kayaker navigating the intense floodwaters, which was pretty wild. Other roads suffered damage, either being washed out or getting covered in rocks and mud. Several bridges were affected. There were also reports of power outages in different parts of the 2.2 million acre park. Of course, the Montana governor was quick to assure people that they'd open for business soon enough. Eventually, the park had successfully opened up for business by October 2022, and things seemed to go back to normal. Except, one more event that had nothing to do with seismic activity or eruptions nearly shut down the park for visitors. Possible third closure. As of September 2023, the U.S. government's indecisions put Yellowstone in peril. But miraculously, by the 30th of the month, it was decided Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park would not shut down. Initially, there were warnings of potential closures due to a funding disagreement in Congress. But A contingency plan from the National Park Service suggested that some areas might remain accessible even during a shutdown. This uncertainty caused confusion among visitors, with questions about booked trips and new reservations. Despite potential park closures, there was room for certain areas to stay open, providing potential for tour guides to operate. So, for now, for no dramatic reason, is the Yellowstone Park shutting down. All in all, the crisis seems to be averted. So will you still visit Yellowstone National Park, despite rumors of a volcanic eruption?